In my heartfelt autobiography, I bare my soul with emotional honesty, with stories about affairs and anxieties, milestones and mistakes, and successes that made India proud. Stories of heart-wrenching setbacks and how I survived the roller coaster journey of my making, breaking, and remaking as a man. Stories I Must Tell is an emotional experience. I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy Stories I Must Tell, the emotional journey of an actor.
So hello everyone. I really don't know how to contain my excitement today. I am Neeta Aneja and I'm the founder of Trends, which is art, cultural, social and literary experiences. With me today in our 49th author interaction of our Trends literature series, in collaboration with Rotary Cosmopolitan today, we have a very, very special guest on our platform today. Mr. Bedi's career has spanned 3 continents in Bollywood, Europe, and Hollywood for over 3 decades. He's most known for his roles in American television series The Bold and Beautiful, the James Bond movie Octopussy, in which he was the arch nemesis of Roger Moore, and then the very, very popular Italian series Sandokan, which is till now everyone's favorite, and his Bollywood blockbuster Khoon Bhari Maang, among so many others that he's been doing over the last so many years. So for Kabir, as Shakespeare said, all the world is a stage. His Sandokan Italian series broke all possible broadcasting records in Europe. For his lifetime achievements, he was bestowed Italy's highest civilian honor, Cavalier, a knighthood. In theatre, he starred at Luminetto Theatre Festival, in Canada, in London's West End, and in India's as Othello and Tughlaq. He's a long-standing voting member of the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences, which awards the very coveted Oscar Awards. He's known for his social causes in India. In fact, he's been kind of a COVID warrior. He's been really educating people on COVID vaccinations, protocols, and also he really does a lot of good work for Sight Savers India. So Kabir has just released his best-selling autobiography, Stories I Must Tell, The Emotional Life of an Actor, to great critical acclaim. This book, I must mention, has been published by Westland Publications, and it is definitely a brutally honest memoir. And he writes about the heart-wrenching setbacks, mistakes, successes, and life lessons. So a big shout out to all of you to definitely order this book, grab a copy, and read all about him. So welcome, Kabir, to our one of the most anticipated and most sought after session today since we started a literature series 1 year back.
Thank you very much, Neeta, for that wonderful introduction. I look forward to having a lovely chat with you and all those who are listening, wherever they may be. We're all in different places in this virtual world, but at least we can gather together when it comes for a good cause or a good book.
So I'll dive into the conversation immediately because after my conversation, there's a August gathering of people who've been wanting to interact with you. So I'll not like to keep them waiting for long. So coming to my first question, I've always felt that when someone writes a biography, the first question that has always popped in my mind is how personal is too personal. I mean, you've written so honestly about what happened in your life, in your career, with your family, your marriages, apart from that, your successes. So did you really set a bar for yourself when you started writing about how honest you can be in your book? And did it really drain you a lot? So much so that, you've written the whole book. It's a big book, I would say.
Neeta, I was wanting to write my story for a long time. And when I finally got down to it, it was just like a volcano waiting to burst. And it just flowed from me. It was a force bigger than me. It wrote itself because I'd held it back for so long. And when I was clear how to do it, I wrote it, in one mad, passionate rush of writing. I was clear that I was going to tell my story. And the important thing is to tell it as honestly and authentically and cleanly and interestingly as possible. because every biography tells a story. I wanted to tell mine slightly differently. I wanted, firstly, to break away from the linear structure. I wanted to tell it in a way whereby I could go back and forth in time, which is what I did. I also said that I'm going to tell it warts and all. Just tell it like it is, because if I speak of my great triumphs, then I must be equally willing to talk of my great tragedies. If I talk of great losses, I must be able to talk of my great loves as well. So it's important that people share that journey with me. So my book is really an emotional journey of an actor whose career has traversed 3 continents, and what it feels like to go through these challenging situations, heartbreaking situations, heart-exhilarating situations. Everything is part of my story. That's why I think I have a very good story, because just telling good things is not a story. Good stories come from conflict between right and wrong, good and bad, ups and downs, which is what my life is all about. And it's about the journey of being human through it all, and what a human being experiences in the course of great elation as well as great suffering. That's the journey I've shared. So there were no filters on that. I decided to write it, and I wrote it with all the clarity I could, all the skill I could, to make it an interesting journey for people who read it.
And tell me one thing, are there still some things that you've kept undercover still? I know it's a brutally honest memoir, but are there still some things, some stories that you've kept back, you've held back?
The essence of my story, the basic spine of my story, what my real story is certainly in the book. Because of the structure that I chose of telling it through a series of stories, there are certain stories that I had to leave out because they were kind of scenic diversions to the main story. And that becomes boring, because every time you're trying to tell a story, if you go down every alley along the road, people lose patience. I have found from my experience as an actor, as a performer, as someone who's read books and knows drama, that you have to keep a dramatic interest alive. You have to keep that thread of tension going through the whole thing. So people want to know what the next paragraph is, what the next chapter is, what's next. That's why a lot of people call my book unputdownable, because I don't stray, and I don't let their minds stray. I keep them focused on what's happening by rivetingly telling what's happening. And to do that, I had to leave out some stories. There are many stories of my America years, etc. So maybe I'll sit down and write those in time too. But for now, my job is to get the word out that I've written a book, let people know what the essence of the book is, what's in it for them, what's in it from me, and hopefully there's a happy meeting of minds and everyone enjoys the book that they read, because I've certainly enjoyed writing it, and I certainly hope they enjoyed reading it. Because, it's wonderful, Neeta, I want to say that to talk to a group of book lovers. This is a very special group. You can broadcast all you like on social media. 95% of them don't read books, And for me, there's no difference between those who can't read books and those who don't read books, So if you're a book reader, it's a very special tribe. And so talking to people who are interested in books and literature is something very special for me. So I'm delighted to be speaking to your group, because obviously with your author series and your focus on literature and the arts, this is a group that loves books, loves the arts, and I'm delighted to speak to them, because I'm speaking to the very people that I wrote the book for.
Fantastic. And thank you for the compliments. And I'm sure all of our viewers will be so happy to know your mind. In fact, I must tell everyone, the book has 8 chapters, and you can pick up any chapter and you can just go through it, and you can again go back to the first chapter. You've written it so well, and it's very easy to read, very flowy, very relatable. And, I really feel that your book entirely is relatable, even though you have lived a life most of the people can only dream of. But still, like, for example, in the very first chapter, you mention a poem you had written and how it went on to win the Shankar's art competition. my daughters have always participated in the same, and even when I was younger, I used to do that. So I could relate to to this totally. So, have I, the way you felt when you won it, especially the way you've expressed it at a very, very young age, is something so relatable, and I could easily relate to it. Similarly, your inner turmoil with trying to decide what you want to do. So, really, your book, as I just mentioned, will relate to all the ages. And we have touched with all kinds of age groups in our book. So, what would you say was your favorite part of recalling incidents from that long ago?
It's like asking a mother, which is your favorite child. But the fact is that mothers don't tell, but they always have a favorite child. And that is something that I think, I certainly enjoyed talking about my successes. I certainly went through a great trauma talking about the tragedies that befell me. But I really enjoyed writing the chapter on my parents, because while 3 books have already been written on my mother, Frida Bedi, one by BBC journalist Andrew Whitehead, nobody has written the story of my mother and father together. And each were remarkable people that led remarkable lives. And I was able to put that together in one chapter. And it's, I think, a very moving chapter, a very special chapter about 2 extraordinary human beings who went from, these are people that fought for India's independence, living in huts in Lahore. And don't forget, Lahore was the capital of undivided Punjab. And all the ferment of the freedom struggle was happening there. And these are people who were, knew and related to Nehru and Gandhi and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, and had encounters with Tagore. My mother was, in fact, a handpicked Satyagrahi of Mahatma Gandhi. And then how they transitioned in the post-independence years to becoming major religious figures, with my mother becoming a Buddhist nun and my father becoming a New Age philosopher in Italy. So, it's a remarkable story in there. And the relationship between them, and what it takes to be the son of such parents, and how does that affect me? How does that affect my thinking, my philosophy of life? All those things were captured in that one chapter. And there's many such chapters of many such people. So I'd say that's my favorite chapter. Okay.
I've always felt that no interview of yours is ever complete without your mentioning about your amazing parents. And once one reads the chapter, particularly, one realizes why is it so. In fact, the way you've structured the chapter and the way you've written about it is totally incredible. So it was great to learn about them. So, but did you find it difficult to write about them after so many years?
No, in fact, it was a great joy. I'd been wanting to write about them because, as I said, there's 3 books already on my mother and her remarkable life, but none of my parents together. And my father was no less remarkable in his way. So what was that relationship? And I was certainly helped because 3 books had been written on my mother. So many certain details that I learned from those books as well. I knew the story. I had lived through much of it. I had all the letters, all the source material of her life, which I shared with all the writers. So I had all that material with me. I'd kept it. And they came from the family archives as well. So it wasn't difficult in the sense of writing it. What I had to do was to think, because again, I don't like the linear form. So how do I tell it in a way that doesn't begin at the beginning, my mother's father was killed in the First World War, etc. I don't want to take people into those spaces. I wanted to do it in a way that would capture people's attention right from the start, and then tell it in a way that everything comes back through a series of short flashbacks, and you get the whole picture, and then you see the journey of their life. It was a pleasure to write that chapter. That's why I call it my favorite chapter, because they are my favorite people.
So, right. In fact, Kabir, you've been in limelight for so long, and now you've written so nicely and detailed out your personal and professional life. How do you deal with the topics of your life that become controversial? And while writing, did you pay heed to any of the critics and their fickle opinions?
Neeta, a lot of people have said to me how frank I've been, how open I've been. How could I be so honest? I am honest because I've revealed a lot of secrets that people normally things that normally people keep secret.
Yes.
They don't want to know about the disastrous financial investment somebody made. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about the traumas that they experienced in relationships. And relationships are form certainly two major chapters of my book. They're not the only thing in my book, but of course the media pounces on them, which is fine. It's in my book, it's my story. But it's done in a very cinematic way. So you actually feel you're there. You're part of the scenes. You're part of the conflict. You're part of this dynamic between two people. All of them in Bollywood, and it's very volatile industry, dealing with these highly strung people in your relationships with many wonderful traits, many darker traits, and talking about them all. That's because I was able to share my frailties too, and I had the freedom to do that. So my whole purpose in doing this was to say, look, guys, this is life. This is my life. This is my truth. And I'm going to tell it to you no matter what, because that's been my journey.
Fantastic journey, inspirational journey it has been. You know, I read somewhere about you, or was it in the book itself, that you wanted to become an architect earlier on. And I have my co-host Shreya, who's an architect, spoken word poetess, and a great fan of yours. And Shreya will come on right now. Yes.
Okay.
Good evening, sir. It's a pleasure to hear you talk. It's such an honor to be able to talk to you today. And
Thank you, Shreya.
I have listened to so many of your interviews. So when I was reading your book, I've started to read and write a lot nowadays, write specifically. So I was reading your book and I felt, I had sort of like a deep connection with you, because the flow in which you write is natural. It's as if I'm sitting next to my grandfather and talking to him. So thank you so much for that, because I started remembering all the times that I've been next to him and he's been telling me stories.
Right.
So I had a little question for you. That when you first started writing the book, when you first started thinking about writing about your life, did you picture it to become what it has become today? When I think about the book, I think about it as a warm hug on a winter evening, something that I would like sort of take comfort in, but also learn from. So did you picture it like that when you started writing?
The way I pictured my book was that I thought of your generation when I wrote this book. My book is dedicated, if you read the dedication, to all young techies and professionals like my son Siddharth, who want to make the world a better place. Because a lot of my generation know about me. Today's generation know less about me because I haven't seen my films in recent years, or at least not that many. So also they don't know people that have lived through the 60s and the 70s and the excitement of those decades on the planet, not just in India, what it's like to be in Bollywood and Hollywood in the 80s and 90s. What are the ups and downs of an actor's life? I wanted to share a history of the times in which I lived, as well as my own history, and I wanted to do it not in a very formal kind of, write the facts. I wanted to do it in a very human way. So the tone is very conversational. There's not a single word in the book that you have to go to the dictionary for. It's done as if I'm talking to you right now. And it's done, written with humor, with style, so that it keeps a conversation alive. You feel you're talking to me as though I'm talking to you. And that is, and I'm not cluttering the story. Interesting, but it doesn't relate to the main story. So my effort was to not give you a warm hug. I'm glad it gives you a warm hug, but I just wanted to keep you riveted to the book. My intention was write it in a way they can't put it down. Write it in a way that they're committed to reading it once they begin. And I, as an actor, understand drama. I understand the dramatic form and the need for tension within stories. And that's what I set out to do, to tell it as interestingly as I could, so that a whole new generation discovers those times, they discover me, and also a lot of the extraordinary successes I had abroad. Today's generation doesn't know. And I wanted them to be reminded of that and to know that even though you have great success, it's never an easy road in the film business. It's the most dangerous business to be in the world, because your fame can evaporate with 3 flop films. And all the trouble you took to get to the top can be wiped out in no time. And and also, I wanted to share what mistakes you should not make. The mistakes I made, which I paid the price. Do not make those mistakes. So I hope to save a lot of people from making those mistakes too. But above all, I wanted to talk about my parents, my children, people in places that I knew and loved, and also how I resurrected myself from the ruins at one stage in my career to the point where I was knighted by the Italian Republic. All that makes for great storytelling. So my intention was to tell a great story. That's what the book is about. And I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad you thought it's a warm hug, because that's the tone with which I've written it.
Yes, exactly. It was very engrossing, as you said. And I, for one, am now aware of, your life. And it has been very interesting and very colorful. And I actually this was my next question. I wanted to ask you that when I was reading the book, I felt that, it was inspiring me, at the same time making me aware, because it is so, like, you talk in a very self-aware tone, you know what was wrong and, what you could have done and all of that. So it really inspired me and motivated me. But what inspires you today and still motivates you to do all that you do and do it so well till now, after all these years?
Sure. I'm the eternal optimist, and I always believe the best is yet to come. I'm also a creative soul, and creative souls are never at peace. Creative souls are always in search of something more, to express themselves in other ways. From being an actor, I become a writer. From being a broadcaster in Delhi, I moved on to advertising in Bombay. From Bombay advertising, I moved on to films in Bombay. Then I went international. You reinvent yourself all the time. So I am also in the process of reinventing myself all the time. And author is my latest incarnation. And that creative urge that people have within them, that needs to be expressed. What form that takes in the future, I don't know. All I know is there's probably another book on the anvil. But as long as I have something to give, something to share, something I think people would add value to people's lives and make things better in some way, that's what I'd like to do. Because creative people never retire.
That's amazing. That's actually very exciting to know, because I am incredibly passionate about being an architect and doing my job, but hearing that there's a possibility of that never dying, that is very interesting, and that really motivates me. And I also wanted to ask you about the possibility of an audiobook coming out. And I, for one, would definitely be excited to hear it in your voice again, because you have such a beautiful baritone. So that would be lovely.
Well, Shreya, I have good news for you. The audiobook is on its way. I'm in the process of recording it. In fact, before coming here, I was in the studio all day recording the book. And hopefully, if all things go well, within the next month, certainly, before August 15th, the audiobook should be out. I would have liked it to be earlier, but then I've got some filming happening in the south in between, which takes me away for a good 10 days. So that puts a break on my recording. But by August 15th, I think August 15th might be a good day to launch it, but could be earlier. But the audiobook is definitely on its way, because if I'm going to tell my story, and I say stories I must tell, then I must tell it verbally also, in an audio form also. And since people talk about my voice and use me for commercials and documentaries and events, etc., all the more reason that I record my story as a book.
Very exciting. Very excited for that. I would definitely love to listen to it again, for sure.
Same here.
I hope you do.
All the best for that.
And spread the word. Spread the word.
And one thing I wanted to know before I get on to my interactive round is that many of us, in fact, many of my viewers and a lot of people got back to me and said, you must ask this question. So are we looking at a movie on your book? And who's going to be enacting your role? That's very important.
That I can't say who will be enacting the role, because there's many me's in the book from the age of 20 to today. So there'll be probably many actors. But the thing is, I'm sure that my book will find a place as a film or a series or an OTT series, a miniseries, at the right time and right place. Right now, it's not something I'm worrying about, because I have the book being released now in Italy, who will also have a great interest in looking at the audiovisual possibilities of it, later in England and America. So who knows where it will be made and how it will be made and who will make it. But I do know it will be made at some point, and it'll find its own home. But right now, my effort is to spread the message of the book and hope that the film, when it gets made, or the series, when it gets made, is made in the most interesting way possible.
Wonderful. And it would definitely leave you with life lessons that you want to know for your life, and specifically for young people like me who want to be inspired. So
and beyond lessons, I hope it's a great emotional experience for you to read the book, because I take you through the emotions of my life and share those with you. So books are an immersive experience. You share the mind of another person. You share the journey of another person in a very intimate way. And how intimate depends on how intimate they choose to make it. But I hope that my book is inspiring. I hope it has lessons in it. But above all, I hope people are able to enjoy the emotion of sharing the emotion of that journey with me, because that's what I set out to do.
For sure, definitely.
Moving on to the interactive round, I must say that the whole episode is actually for the COVID warriors, and we wanted to salute them. And the past year and the most part of this year has been really, really drastic for us in the hardest way possible. All of our lives have turned upside down. It was truly something none of us could have imagined coming. But during these dark times, doctors, frontline workers, and people who volunteered to help in the pandemic became a hope and a ray of light. With this, I would like to welcome Dr. Rajiv Tandon. He's a health director, RTI International India, and has been working in the public health and nutrition sector as a thought leader for about 4 decades. He's a pediatrician. He advises Government of India on their COVID-19 response plans. Dr. Rajiv Tandon.
Hi, Neeta. Thank you for this opportunity. And hi, Kabir. Very nice hearing you, and congratulations on your book and all that you've shared. It is an inspiration. I would shift gears, as Neeta mentioned. I'm a pediatrician and an advisor to the Government of India for COVID vaccination. And as I saw a short Instagram message from you, we are in the midst of something called vaccine hesitancy in a very, very big way in India.
Yes.
Part of the blame, I think, is to us doctors who possibly didn't do our homework well enough. We've confused public between the types of vaccines and this, that, and the other. The appeal that I have for you, and this I did share with Neeta, was there was a time when we had requested the same thing to Amitabh Bachchan for polio eradication. And you know what happened to polio eradication.
Very successful.
Very successful. Would you be open to becoming a motivator, a champion, person who would actually influence behavior change for COVID vaccination? And if that is possible, through Neeta, I would connect with you offline and share our appeal and request. And then if you agree, we would take it forward.
Rajiv, I want you to know that this, I've been concerned and saddened by this entire COVID pandemic that has blighted the lives of so many, those who've lost their health, those who've lost loved ones, those who've lost jobs. I feel very deeply. And I certainly have participated and done my bit towards it. Even today on my Instagram post, there's a thing asking people to vaccinate. There was a thing I did for News 18, which was a thing that went out. There was, and even I have various charities that I'm involved with where I put in a lot of serious time. I don't just casually attach my name to a charity. I get very involved. And one of them is Sight Savers India. And their latest campaign is Leave No One Behind. Help people with disabilities get vaccinated. And I've done a video for them as well. So it's not as though I haven't participated in this. And should you want me to do a video for you, I'd be very happy to do a video for you. But I won't be able to take on the responsibility of sort of becoming a brand ambassador for you, because that would be too much given everything that I am involved in, various charities that I am doing. Because I am concerned, and like I did a video for the Responsible Tourism Society of India as well, for a friend of mine from St. Stephen's. So I'll certainly do a video for you, but don't think of me in terms of a campaign or a brand ambassador, because socially, in terms of social commitments, I'm overcommitted. But I'm happy to help. I'm happy to help.
Thank you so much, Kabir. Thank you very much. Yeah. Look forward to this.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Tandon, for taking our time from your busy schedule. Now we have Dr. Pankaj. He's the Director of Medicine and Metabolic Diseases at Max, along with, he's also the founder of Naveda Healthcare, and he's been practicing actively for the last 3 decades, and he's treated over 5,000 COVID patients during the pandemic. Dr. Pankaj.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir. Good evening.
So I'm so happy that you are promoting COVID protocols, encouraging people to stay safe during this pandemic. And we as doctors, we look up to people like you who have a lot of influence and fans, including me, to help us save lives. We remain indebted to you, sir. Real great thanks for that, and congratulations on your book. But I would like to ask you one question. I heard you interviewed Beatles at a very young age.
Yeah.
You went on to succeed in India, then in Italy, and then into Hollywood. People often say that this is a very tough
niche to crack. I think that is the sentence.
In essence, I thank him for his kind words. I certainly accept that it's a very difficult road. A lot of young people come to me and say, how can we become actors? And a lot more come to me saying, how can we become actors internationally? Now, the time I went, it was really tough because they weren't writing roles for Indians. And this was one of the biggest problems that I faced. So I had to play diverse ethnic nationalities. It's only in the James Bond film where I actually was cast as an Indian and a Sikh, which is what I am. Other than that, I played Moroccan princes and Arab people and Spanish and Italian and all kinds of other roles. The point I'm saying is that it's easier today, but it's not easy. This business is never easy. And people that want to enter this business should think of it because they love what they do. Whether it's being an actor, then make sure you love acting, because you'll find a home. There's enough work going around today. You'll find work in OTT or television or theater or film, you will be happy because you're doing what you love. If you're just looking for fame, then you're asking for heartbreak, because fame is a lottery. Only few people become really famous. You could be you, but don't bank on it. Don't bet the farm on it. Don't set out for that reason alone.
But you still managed to crack Hollywood so well, even after it being a tough niche.
Well, yeah, I mean, I did some very substantial work in Hollywood, but it also gave me some of my hardest times, mainly because of the investments I made. But still, there were times when there just weren't enough roles, and that certainly affected me. But fortunately, Italy gave me so much and revived me in such a brilliant way that I have to give the greatest debt of gratitude to Italy. But in all this, there are lessons of, the problems of success. Even success has its dilemmas. What you do has enormous implications, not just for yourself, but for other people. In your worst hour, your dilemmas, decisions, and how you lift yourself up to rise again. There's a lot of lessons in there as well. Because when you're in a dark place, you've lost your job, or you've lost money, or you've lost people, and you're depressed, it takes a lot of mental energy to pull yourself out of that place. You can't just say be positive, because hota nahi hai. Kaise I'm positive? I've lost my job, I've lost my, somebody close to me, I've lost my son, whatever. What does it take to do that? That's part of my journey, and that's what I've shared.
Everyone who's joining late, we're discussing Mr. Bedi's book, Stories I Must Tell. And to know more about him, to know more about his stories, you must grab a copy and order it on Amazon, and you can always find it in all the bookstores near you.
Yeah.
So
I want to say, when I held this completed copy in my hand the first time, it was like winning an Oscar. It was like winning an Oscar. I said, I finally did it. Something I've been wanting to do in my mind for the last 20 years, thinking actively about it for the last 10 years. And finally, I did it. So I feel it's a great sense of accomplishment and achievement, and having put down my life in what I think is an interesting way, because the reviews have been so fantastic, I couldn't really have asked for more. I just wish that even more people read it and enjoy it and know more about me.
Now we have Dr. Puneeta Hasija. She's a very senior gynae, and she's the president of Indian Medical Association, Faridabad, and she's the president for the 4th term. And she, in fact, in COVID times, worked in collaboration with district administration, civil hospital, all private hospitals. She's a iron doctor. Yes, Dr. Puneeta, please.
Hello, good evening, sir. It's a great listening to you.
Hi, Puneeta. Lovely talking to you.
So you are a inspiration to all the younger generation for your fitness. And being a doctor, I will keep motivating our youngsters and take care of yourself. And we are blessed to have you on this platform. I'm really lucky to be interacting with you, sir.
How wonderful, how wonderful. It's nice to be appreciated. Nice to hear the wonderful things you're saying. Yes, we all have to worry about our health these days, and we all need to be careful. And we all need to make sure that other people are careful as well. Because, we're all in this together. We are all in this together. And as one of the campaigns of my Site Service campaign is, don't leave anyone behind. If people with disabilities can't get to vaccination centers, help them get to those vaccination centers. If people are reluctant to vaccinate themselves, convince them it's the only way out. So all those things.
Now we have Dr. Amrinder Bajaj. She's a former HOT, Max, and gynecologist by profession, but she's passionate about her writing. She's written multiple books, and she's written a beautiful, hilarious, salacious account of her times with Khushwant Singh. And I know he's been an inspiration to you. So I would like to invite Dr. Amrinder Bajaj to interact with you.
Right.
Hello.
Do we have? Yes, yes. Amrinderji, how are you?
Good. How are you? First of all, let me compliment you on your looks, on your voice, on your book.
Thank you. Thank you.
You look handsomer than the picture in your younger age in the book.
Thank you.
Now.
Very kind.
And I've had a lot of interaction with Mr. Khushwant Singh. And even once we talked about Pratima Bedi going over there when your house in Kasoli when your son passed away and she spent 4 days over there grieving and all that. And even I've written one book is with him, all the interaction I've had with him over 35 years period.
Yes.
It's called An Afternoon Girl, my Khushwant Memoirs. Because as a doctor, I could meet him only in the afternoons when I didn't have my clinic hours. Right. And then I also started writing, I wrote my autobiography, which is called For the Love of a Man. Okay. I'm done with love of a man. It's not that because of a love of a man, because I've had enough, because I've always been betrayed or whatever. But anyhow, the story, then I would ask him, why would anyone, first of all, why am I writing an autobiography? And secondly, you are famous, so people would want to read you, but why would anyone want to know about an unknown Indian woman? But then I had to write, I was like as a gynecologist, I can only give examples. I was like a woman in labor, like you said, like volcano erupted. And I had to put that forth out like that. So he was very encouraging and very interesting and very naughty, of course. And we had a nice thing. And so how are you? What is your inspiration from Khushwant Singh?
Amrita, you talk about writing your book. I'm sure it's a wonderful book, because any book that's deeply heartfelt and emotionally sincere and real is of interest to everybody, because we all want to know what that human emotions and journeys are like and the uniqueness of that. So thank you for writing your book, because I'm sure it has benefited many people in sharing your life, because it affects their lives as well. Khushwant was a remarkable person, a great writer, great historian, but he was, to begin with, he was a friend of my parents from their Lahore days, when they lived in these huts, and there were all these leftists which comprised of people that became very famous later, Gyani Zail Singh and Inder Gujral and Sheikh Abdullah and Hafiz Jalandhari, who became the poet laureate of Pakistan. And Khushwant wasn't a leftist rabble-rouser, but he was a sympathizer. So he'd come, and he'd meet, and he was curious he had a curious mind. So he was always there. And then later in life, Khushwant was the first person who published a short story of mine, which is in my book called Ramblings on a Beach, and included that story that was published first in the Illustrated Weekly. That story he included in Khushwant Singh Selects Best Indian Short Stories, Volume 1. So my story is in that.
Wonderful.
Beyond that, Khushwant said to me, I went to Khushwant and said, Khushwant, tell me, how do you write so much, man? Where do you find this time to write so much? And he said, phone chak ke rakh do. Phone chak ke rakh do. And he was talking about the landlines, where if you pick up the phone, put it down, nobody can reach you. And then he said, and you must set aside certain hours in the day when you just write. You don't let anybody or anything get in that way. And that's what I did. I basically created that time. And for me, it was a long time because I was writing in a frenzy, and made sure I was not interrupted. My wife, Parveen, helped me enormously, fend off all the diversions. And I dealt with everything else only in the evening. All day I would write, breaking only for meals. So Khushwant Singh was a great guide for me in that way. And I also met him in London and Hungary and Delhi at various times and places. And there was always a very warm rapport, because he knew my family, he knew me from my Bombay days when he was editor when I was in advertising and he was the editor of the Illustrated Weekly. And his friend Rahul has also been a great friend. And I've been to the Khushwant Singh Kasoli Festival in Kasoli, and I just participated in the London virtual festival, where I was talking to NDTV, and it was a lovely interview, a lovely session, again, for the Khushwant Singh Festival.
I was also invited for one of the festivals in Kasoli when I'd written this Khushwant book, which was very well received. Shobha Day was the compeer, and we had a lot of fun time.
Right.
I need to ask you two questions.
Sarah Jacobs is my compeer with NDTV on that festival.
Yeah. Okay, one thing is, how do you deal with the people you've exposed or talked about? Because a lot of my relatives and friends or whoever had written, because I was very honest myself. People are either very happy that she was so daring, or she's so stupid that people would carry such secrets to their graves with them, and you are the exhibitionist of the worst order because I bared my soul. So there were people like that. So you must have also hurt certain people while putting forth this thing. How do you deal with that?
I just let the chips fall where they may. I've told my story. I've told my truth. I've not written it with malice towards anybody. There's no sense of vendetta. There's no sense of using my platform to be unfair to anybody. I looked at my younger self with wise eyes. I looked at them and their younger selves with more compassionate eyes. But I just told it like I saw it. And of course, there's bound to be some people that don't like what you wrote.
Yeah.
But overall, the larger audience has appreciated it greatly, including the reviewers. And what one learns as a public figure is that, there will always be somebody somewhere who doesn't like what you do. There will always be somebody somewhere that says things that are completely untrue about you. You just have to become a little thick-skinned on that and say, let it be water off a duck's back. Because you know where you're coming from, you know the integrity with which you wrote it, and whatever the consequences, we'll deal with them. But those truths need to be said, because if I don't speak my truths, who will?
That's true. Though it may differ from their point of view, their truth.
Of course, and they're entitled to state their truths as well. In the case of, say, Pratima or Parveen, Pratima has written her memoirs. You have a point of view. There is a definitive book on Parveen Babi written by Karishma Upadhyay. That's also there. And there's no quarrel on the basic facts, except for a few points along the way. But in general, there's no clash about the facts about overall what happened or historical accounts. I'm just able to do it, give you the insider story. What happened on the inside, what really happened between two human beings. And I think that has its value. And I'm sure you did the same with your book, which is why it upset a lot of people. But by the same token, I'm sure it enriched the lives of many others who've been in that situation and related to you.
That's true.
You can't be governed by people that criticize you. There'll always be somebody in the book that comes out of the woodwork. And बुराई करना like another काम होता है. फिक्र ना करो जी, आगे बढ़ो.
बिल्कुल ठीक है. Yeah, Khushwant Singh even offered me his house for 15 days in Kasoli, and though he was 35 years older than me, but his reputation preceded him, and no one in my family allowed me to go there. Okay, I've taken.
Good thing that you disobeyed them. Good thing that you disobeyed them.
Thank you,
Dr. Bajaj. In fact, she was one of our very, very early guests on our author interactions. We are forever indebted to her. So now we have Dr. Himanshu Diwan, and he's the director and head of Department of Critical Care Medicine, QRG Health City. During both waves of COVID, he managed one of the highest number of COVID patients in any of the private hospitals. He stretched the hospital ICU bed capacity to almost double. And there's so much more about him. But your question to Kabir, please. Yes, Dr. Diwan.
Good evening, and good evening, Neeta. Thanks for this opportunity to interact with someone who we have seen on the screen and possibly been awed by his presence and his voice.
Thank you,
today
Machu.
we have a chance to talk to you, sir.
Wonderful.
I'll be honest, I haven't read your book yet, and I do plan to read it very soon. But I'm pretty sure that once I read your book, I'll get an answer of one question that has been, in my mind quite some time. So I am an intensivist. I'm a physician who specializes into critical care, and we end up seeing the most sickest of the patients who had COVID. We lost a lot of our patients, lost a lot of our own colleagues and family members. So what I would be, so whenever I read a book, I always have a question when I'm starting to read a book is, why should I read it? And probably in your book, my question would be how you deal with difficult times and how you come out of it. So for us as physicians, we've been trained to manage sick patients. We've been trained to not get emotionally, uh, disturbed by things that you see. But COVID was very different. COVID was very different. When I was stepping up my team, so I have a team of around 15 people, doctors who work with me during COVID. I have a team of nurses, paramedics. So morning, I used to say that, we are the gatekeepers of hell. Let's go and do our job properly.
Right.
What you see in a Hollywood movie was playing real time in front of us. We were losing patients. We were losing people who we knew. We had colleagues of ours who were critically sick on ventilators, people who have been with us working for 12, 14 years, and then you're in charge of, taking care of them where they have a decent possibility of dying. Very difficult time, very difficult.
I can imagine.
So my question to you, and possibly a word of advice from you, would be, how do you really come out of this mentally? I'm pretty sure in your long, illustrious career, you had such times.
Yes. Himanshu, it's not just my long and illustrious career. I think since January 2020 and the onset of this pandemic, so many people have suffered enormously. They have lost loved ones, they've lost jobs, they've lost vocations, they've lost so many things. They've lost the world they were used to. So there is a sense of mourning, a sense of loss that is pervading society today. Whether it's you as a doctor who sees patients dying that you don't want to see die, whether it's losing the world that we knew, this loss, and how do we deal with loss is the question. Because loss is what ultimately saddens us the most, affects us the most, and we have to ensure that this does not run our lives, that life must go on somehow. How do you do that? Now, I have had some enormous losses in terms of my personal relationships, of great women that I knew and loved. Loss of my son, which is the most traumatic. There's a whole chapter on that in my book. And how I dealt with coming out of that, dealing with that loss, facing it, trying to avert it, and then dealing with the consequences of losing my son. So loss is something that I'm painfully aware. It's a part of my book, because it is also, along with all my triumphs and other glories, is what has shaped my life. And this is why I call my book a human experience, because it has everything in it. And I'm saying that we are all suffering from that state of loss. And I think the more we share with each other what it takes, firstly, to feel loss, and there's absolutely a need for a period of mourning. Beyond that, we have to learn to move beyond, because because life must go on. And this is the lesson of my life, that no matter how great the reverse is, you have to find ways of rising and reinventing your realities. You never forget things like that, and you shouldn't. But you cannot remain there. There has to be a point where the purpose of your life is to be served. your creativity is expressed, your job's done, your dreams fulfilled, your children raised. Those factors have to take over because that's the nature of life. And so we must go with that flow. How I did it, it's in my book. I don't want to get to all the details on that. But I've certainly shared what it means to lose and how to deal with that. And I feel deeply for all who've lost. And you must be at the, on the battlefront of this, the front lines of this, where you're seeing all these great people and wonderful people and unfortunate people suffer so much. And I thank you and I salute you for all you're doing, because you are fighting this battle in the thick of it, which is more than I can say for most of us. We can do our slogans, we can do our promotions, we can do our awareness, but you are right there in the battlefield, and I really salute what you're doing and all what your colleagues are doing. You are the front line of this battle against this terrible pandemic. And I hope that with vaccination, we can move beyond it and then build a new life, because the old world isn't coming back. There's a whole new world coming, and we have to learn to adapt to it. And adapting is the whole key to survival.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for those kind and words we can learn from. Adapting, I think, is the key.
Absolutely.
What we learned what we learned is that you can't relive the trauma every day. We saw a lot. And the way we are training ourselves, our teams, the nurses, is don't relive the trauma. So things that are done. And what we can hope is for a better life. The problem is that we all were losing hope. The amount and intensity of this wave was so much that we could not see beyond it. We are losing hope. But as the things started settling, and I really hope vaccination kicks in, because with the vaccine, what we saw is hardly anyone was, very, very few people would actually end up in a hospital or an ICU if you're vaccinated 2 doses.
Right.
And that message has to get out loud and clear. There's no supplement. You may have little side effects of vaccine, or maybe some serious side effects.
No, very, very little and very minor and very few.
Yeah. And disease is massively bad, so there's no comparison. I think we can get vaccinated.
And relatively speaking, it's the ill effects are statistically not significant. Some people have. Let's not get into that. The main thing is, it does not have any serious side effects for 99.99% of the population. So let's hope that the vaccine hesitancy ends and people get themselves vaccinated, because that's the only way out on a long-term basis.
Absolutely. That's the only way out. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for those kind
words. For taking out time from your busy schedule. I know, Kabir, we have exceeded the time limit, but we have 2 last questions. If you have the time, I'll take it. Otherwise, we'll carry on.
Very quickly. Very
quickly. Yes. Can you unmute Ajay? In fact, Mr. Juneja is the industrialist. He's the MD Juneja Steels, and he's been a COVID warrior. So we'll have one quick question from him.
Hi, Neeta. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Hi, Kabir. How are you?
Hi, Ajay. Good speaking to you.
I was just listening to you that you have lost a lot of, like, your son and a lot of people you're talking. And that is a chapter which you are having in your, and which you are saying that one must read it, and then you will be able to learn and understand. I agree with you. And I have been a follower of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, which says, Naam Japo Kirt Karo and Van Ke Chapo. And during pandemic times, we have been doing all these things. And we were doing the seva from the Gurdwara Sahib, doing seva of langar, serving langar to almost 45,000 people in Faridabad, because that was a time when the government said that they were not having sufficient arrangements for making the langar and do the seva and to serve the people. But that was the time when we came forward as an institution, Gurdwara, Sector 15 Gurdwara Institution, Faridabad, which took the initiative to serve the people who were hungry, who were traveling from this place to, there were migrants, labor migrants who were traveling from here. And that time I saw the people, what is the pain of the people was literally something which was, though they were knowing that there's a pandemic going on, and still people were traveling from here to there, and they were little worried about, people were losing their jobs, people were losing their everything, and still they were looking for the hunger and thirst. That time I found that India is still still struggling for the food, basic amenities. How can we help them? How can we support the people of our country? As like you have been a very old veteran and a citizen, you know how you are a well capable man. So how do you think, how do we should do the charity, and how we can support the people of our country to bridge the gap between the have and have nots?
Maybe we do what we can. सिखाना तो कमाल करता, लंगर जगह जगह पाके लोगों को खुआ के जो भी कर सकते थे सारे ने खुआया, इतना कुछ कीता that they made India proud of what they did. Ultimately, we are not the government, but we can help in our own way. I found that, you know, like in the freedom struggle that my parents were through, during this crisis, people have in some ways risen to a social cause. Even our building, people were gathering meals to give to the watchmen who couldn't eat, give it to people in the market, give it to people who didn't have food. There's a kind of social conscience that awakes in times of crisis. And we have seen a remarkable resurgence of this. And like I said, Sikhanat Waqi Kamal Karta, and the amount of lives they've saved and people they've fed and service they've done. But then that is the essence of Sikhism, you know, beyond talking about one God and tolerance and equality of everybody, service to others, seva, is part of the whole ethos of the Sikh community. And they proved it over and over and over again. Forget India, they were feeding the truckers that were stuck in England when the tunnel was closed. And the truckers were in lines not having food. And the Sikhs arrived there with their langar, said, Khao ji, you know, asi aa gaya, fikr na karo. So one has to salute private efforts, what each can do in their own way, in their own neighborhood, their own community. The government will do what it does. We as people can do what we can at an individual level and still make a difference. That's my thought.
Very true. Very true, sir. So we can move on to, I think, just the last very quick question, Yuvraj. You can ask your question. He's a student.
He's a school student. Yuvraj first. He's a student of class 12 and he did a lot during COVID, arranged a lot of beds, oxygen. So he wanted to ask you a question. Yuvraj, a very, very quick one, please.
Yes, so first of all, good evening, sir. And it's, you know, an absolute honor to interact with you on this virtual platform.
Thank you, Viraj.
So my question is, you know, so there's a fine line of distinction which exists between the real world and the real world. Considering both as social realities, it is preconceived that, you know, one ought to exert pressure on the other one. So did you face any circumstance or challenges as such where the real or the real world made an impact on your internal choices? You know, which aspect would justify your personality effectively? Was it the former, latter, or a mix of both these worlds, the real and the real, which, you know, acted as a catalyst in the process of making of a legend like you?
Ek gal mainu Punjabi samjhao. It simplifies things a bit. Punjabi always gets down to the root of the things. But your question is valid. What is the impact of the real life on real life, and what's the impact of real life on real life? You know, for me, Yuvraj, ever since I joined films and began my career in Bollywood and had this enormous stardom and success in Europe, and of course being known for my American series, etc., that real life always impacts my real life. Because firstly, it makes me a public personality, which means I'm of interest to everybody, which means that I have to be very conscious of what I do and don't do in public, because it can have all kinds of ramifications. Now, there is a certain loss of privacy. I can't just go into a piazza in Italy and sit down and have a coffee and watch a sunset without 10 people coming in and asking me for selfies and autographs, etc. But I don't complain about that. That's comes with the territory. If you work so hard to become famous, then don't resent what happens when you become famous. Otherwise take a job where you don't become famous. Enjoy the sunset in peace. For me, that real life has always affected my real life, because also all my personal relationships then become manna for the media, then become subjects for discussion, then become subject for misinformation, then becomes, it's a non-stop process, but I don't resent it, because that's the profession I chose. And to the extent that, say I did a role like Sandokan, which got me this huge stardom in Europe. Yes, the role got me the stardom, but equally, the real Kabir put himself into that role, which then became the real role that created my stardom. So there's always, once you become a public personality, an interaction between the real and real. That becomes inseparable, because it is who you are. It's part of my identity. I can become an author and write a book, but I'm still defined as an actor, because that is the identity and brand that I've built for myself as an international actor who's acted across continents, who's seen the life of a star, who's seen its greatest glories and suffered some of its biggest reverses. That's my identity. The real and the real are separate things, but they are simultaneous in their effect on me. It's part of life, part of my life, certainly.
Thank you, sir.
My pleasure, Yuvraj. Please read my book and enjoy it.
Sure, sir. Definitely, sir.
And spread the word to your friends. It's written for your generation.
He's already doing that. He's a big fan of yours.
Okay.
And I would like everyone to switch on their videos. I know they've been wanting to kind of be on the screen with you. That'll be really nice. And, Kabir, I was a big follower of Sandokan, and I remember you on that black horse with a white robe always. Whenever I think about you, that is one image you always carry. And I'm sure most of us on this platform carry that image quite close to their heart. And thank you so much for being on this platform. This means so much to us. And I cannot thank
I'm
Shreya.
delighted to be invited by you, and very happy with the interaction we've had and the wonderful people I've talked to, especially the COVID warriors. And I really compliment you and Trends for the wonderful interactions you create between writers, creative people, and people who are interested in the arts and books and performing arts. It's a wonderful thing to be doing. I really salute you for that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I really want to thank Shweta of Westland for putting this session together. I have a special thanks for Rotary Cosmopolitan Faridabad, especially Ajay and Mother. They have really, really been quite helpful in putting this session together. And thanks to a lot of good activities they keep on doing. And a big thanks to the audience who's been here at a time when most of us have started being to the office also now. And it's all because of you, Kabir, because they are such big fans of yours. And
thank you. I'm delighted, and thank you. And I once again remind you about my book. Do take the time and the trouble to get it, read it. I don't take these things for granted. We are time challenged. So if somebody takes the time and the trouble to get it, read it, appreciate it, spread the word, it means the world to me. It means the world to me. So thank you for having this session to promote that idea.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir, for being here.
over to your audio.
Thank you, sir.